So happy that you are joining us. Nairobi, Kenya, Canada. Come into the room. And so, as you all continue to introduce yourselves in the chat, just want to bring all of us up to speed on why we are here today. At Archiving the Black Web, we are launching now our Digital Literacy and Cultural Stewardship webinar series. This series is really dedicated this year to strengthening digital literacy, advancing archival practices, and safeguarding the web as a vital site of cultural memory. As our histories and our identities and movements increasingly live online, the series throughout the year really convenes scholars, information professionals, technologists, and vast community members to really critically examine how we engage with the web, how we navigate, interpret, and preserve digital culture. Now, this series is going to frame cultural stewardship as more than just digital access or curation, but in really understanding that this is an intentional practice grounded in critical analysis, ethical responsibility, technical fluency, and long-term preservation. And so we hope that you continue to join us this year as we offer and lift up practical tools and frameworks to help you critically analyze, preserve, and shape our digital presence on the web for future generations. Now, if you have your cell phones or any device, feel free to scan the screen. We are encouraging you to register for the remaining Spring 2026 webinars. Today, we are talking about images of Blackness on the web, representation and reclamation in digital culture. Our next session is coming up in April with Digital Archives Ecosystems, where we talk more about all of the systems that work together to make archives possible. And then on Wednesday, May 6th, really excited for us to host a conversation about archives careers and opportunities for growth. Yes, this session and all of our sessions are recorded, and we will make them available on our YouTube page in a playlist once the session is complete. And we'll also send a recap email with additional sources that we lift up in today's conversation. So please, if you haven't registered for these conversations, we're encouraging you to do so now so that you can stay in conversation with us. I am so happy to be in conversation with one of my favorite educators, researchers, and memory workers, Sakyra Abbitt. Thank you so much for joining us today and lending your expertise. Just want to pass the mic to you to share a bit more about your work and what you do.
Thank you so much, Camille, and hello all. Good day to everyone wherever you are joining us from. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you all for having me. I just wanted to kind of give a brief introduction of not only myself, but my work and kind of the path that I have taken to get there, if you will. And so I kind of wanted to show a visual of the literature that has informed me up until this point, not only as an educator and a researcher, but also as someone who is Black and on the web, and how I interpret Blackness on the web as well. So again, hello everyone. My name is Sakyra. I come from the University of Virginia, where I did both my BA and MA work in media studies or media culture and technology more broadly. And I just also want to preface by reaffirming and uplifting the fact that we all kind of get to the web and are on the web and are caricatures on the web in different spaces and shapes and forms. And so the way in which that I have shaped myself has been through a variety of literature that I hope will also kind of speak to the work that Camille and I are going to be introducing today. So I won't name all in specific, but I do want to kind of reaffirm this theme of Black being and Black joy online. And so coming from the work of Kevin Kawashi and Ruha Benjamin has allowed me to really understand this aspect of being and how important it is to just be online as a Black person in this space where there is so much surveillance, and also how imagination in these spaces comes from that. I also just want to uplift the work of Dr. Andre Brock and Catherine Knight Steele and helping me inform the way of how I study Black folks online and how I study the spaces that I'm already actively engaged upon, and also want to uplift the latter works kind of at the bottom there, and shaping the way that I understand how Black people accumulate into spaces and different kinds of niches, if you will, online, and uplifting also kind of a new pathway of my work that I'm hoping to dive into in doctoral research, but looking into how we are making memory and how we are preserving the way that we have shaped the web thus far. And so, kind of just wanted to give a roundabout of the things that have informed me up until this point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sakyra, and also just for giving us a background and the understanding of what informs your work, and really excited to hear more later in this webinar about your perspective and your point of view. And hello again, everyone. My name is Camille Lawrence. I am an archivist with a background in art history, also a curator and a web archivist. Similar to Sakyra, we both agree that we really wanted to lift up literature that really informs how we approach the work that we do. I have a background in art history, museum studies, and library science. And in navigating the web and entering the web, my grounding is really coming from the perspective of an art historian and understanding visual culture, what that looks like. Just to lift up some of the text that has really informed my work and studies. There's a beautiful series of books published called The Image of Black and Western Art by Harvard University Press. Also, I have to lift up The Black Book by Toni Morrison, one of our first archival books that we see in the US as an accumulation of Black culture. Also, Carrie James Marshall, Lena Veris Ichter, also The New Black Vanguard, Bell Hooks, all inform the ways in which that I approach art, analyze it, think critically about it, and how we as Black people across the web show up in the world. And so, as we get into this conversation, Sakyra and I really wanted to be intentional in grounding everyone in our point of view, right? Our intersections as researcher, memory workers, art historians, and archivists, and how we come to these understandings of knowing and analysis of how we build communities on the web, how we see ourselves on the web. And so we want to lift up and affirm that in this conversation, we are speaking from a space of agency where Black folks are active participants in how we appear online and across the web. And throughout this conversation today, we will be exploring different types of images and community of Blackness on the web. But we also need to affirm that there's a multiplicity of Blackness that is reaffirmed through culture identity. Being Black is not a monolith. And so we know that we may not be able to touch on every single cultural reference or viral moment or movement online. We ask that you give us grace and feel free to share your favorite moments in the chat as we navigate through this conversation. So what we're going to share now is a brief clip of Bell Hooks in an interview excerpt, which also lifts up our grounding statement, really understanding that literacy and visual culture go hand in hand.
Radical interventions in my life with books that I've read, not movies that I've seen, not television shows, but books that I've read. We cannot overvalue enough the importance of literacy to a culture that is deeply visual. I mean, that rather than seeing literacy and the visual and our pleasure in the visual as oppositional to one another, I think we have to see them as compatible with one another. I don't think we will get much further in terms of decolonizing our minds, so that we can both resist certain kinds of conservatizing representations and at the same time create new and exciting representations.
Thank you, Camille. Before we dive into more examples, we thought it would be first kind of a great idea to kind of set the stage, especially for how we understand and come to conceptualize Blackness online, and understanding some of the key scholars that are doing this work. And so I first wanted to raise the point of looking at the work of Catherine Squires and understanding kind of as broader speaking, how we even come to understand different forms of Blackness online, understanding that even through digital formats, Blackness is not a monolith. And so we see this work first introduced through Dr. Catherine Squires as she kind of understands that this concept of counterpublic. And so there's this idea that there is some difference between the public and the counterpublic, which ultimately kind of adds a sort of separation from those who are of higher society, if you will, back in those times. And so essentially what Catherine Squires is doing is understanding that not only are Black people actually a part of these counterpublics, but the way in which that they are introducing and also shaping these spaces are very different in nature as well. And so she talks about enclave publics as communication practices that are present for the community, but do not move beyond that space. And so we see that online as groups that are ultimately there to be, and they are not willing or wanting to move beyond that space. We see this engaged through counterpublics as well, where we see that some spaces online centered around Blackness seek to engage with other publics and may foster community actions such as protests or boycotts. So we see this through kind of what we term as digital activism, and that is where we see counterpublics form. And then we also see satellite publics arise as well. And so we understand satellite publics as having this desired separation from the dominant group, but also willing to engage with other publics as well. And so moving from Squires, we see there are already beginning to be early forms of Blackness that are arising and the different ways in which Blackness is forming various types of publics. And so I also wanted to lift up the work of Kim Gallen and understanding the ways that we are even able to study, even myself as a researcher, able to study Blackness online. And what Gallen does essentially is makes a call for this a need for a link between Black studies and the digital humanities, right? And so that is how we kind of get this importance of understanding how we see and study, interpret, etc. Black technocultural, excuse me, Black technoculture today. And then as we move on into contemporary literature, as we see Laughing While Black, but also critical surveillance, we kind of see this phenomena born of understanding that now, one, we know that Black folks are online and dispersed in very niche communities. We also know that there are now folks studying and interpreting this types of work. And so we see in various ways in which we can study online. And one of those ways is through humor, as we see in Laughing While Black, and we understand the ways that Black folks are congregating online and clapping back, if you will, as a form of reclamation through humor. But we also see the more near end of the spectrum of that side as we look at critical surveillance literacy and understanding the way that Blackness is surveilled online. And as we move toward more contemporary literature, I also just wanted to uplift some texts that I think are really calling for the times that we are in today, because I think not only they're a great representation of calling out the conflict or the problem and the violences that Black people face when we are online and simply just being or simply just wanting to do research, but they also offer solutions as to how Black folks can attempt to accompany these conflicts. So we look into Algorithms of Oppression by Sophia Noble, in which we understand the way in which algorithms are very biased, and we see the ways in which Black folks are disproportionately marginalized online simply by wanting to type in, for example, Black women's hair, right? We see the way that we are sexualized and fetishized from simply being. We also see race after technology, abolitionist tools, and that is when we get into this idea of reclamation and understanding the ways in which we can reclaim our spaces online and counteract this attempt of surveillance. And then we also see by Moya Bailey, Misogynoir Transform, Black Women's Digital Resistance. And what I really appreciate about Moya Bailey and her work is that not only does she understand the ways in which Black women have been impacted in these spaces violently, but she also understands that there are folks on the outskirts of those spaces that are also should be recognized and understood that there are different ways in which Black digital feminism can apply to various aspects of Blackness.
Thank you so much, Sakyra, for grounding us in this work and giving us a clearer understanding of how we show up on the web and these different types of communities. To segue in thinking about reclamation, also wanted to ground us in this image, right? Since the web itself is made up of digital dark matter, I wanted to reference one of my favorite contemporary artists, Kerry James Marshall. His preferred method of technology is mastery level painting, and his unique approach of the rendering of the color black. He orchestrates how he can masterly move through these rich, vast, expansive, immersive depths of tonality and really reimagines African diasporic identities. His large scale portraits help expand the canon of the arts and visual culture to help us think intentionally about a broader spectrum of Black identity. As we're thinking about the purpose of visual culture, it's really important for us to critically examine the images portrayed that we come into contact with online and the messages that they convey. And so, in studying art history, the first time I actually came across this image was on the web, and it was so striking that it drew me to see it in person because I had never seen a rendering of a Black woman displayed in this position of agency before. And so in this portrait, Untitled by Kerry James Marshall, we see a Black woman figure portrayed with beautiful, rich, deep, dark skin tones centralized in the portrait. She's sitting upright, wrapped and adorned in gorgeous fabric, just slightly turned towards us. And her glistening hoops and shining forehead really kind of guide our gaze upwards into this gorgeous chocolate brown updo sculpted to perfection. And her warm eyes speak directly to us as spectators, breaking this wall of viewership and encouraging us to engage directly with her as active spectators as we witness her taking agency in the representation and reclamation of herself. And so I really want to lift up this portrait as an analogy to investigate the tools that we have access to in technology and how we represent and reclaim ourselves on the web. And so what I'm going to do now is show a brief clip of Kerry James Marshall speaking more about his process in creating this work, and the systems that exist within identity formation and Black visual culture.
Portraits. And the one that the MCA has is the portrait of a painter who's painting a portrait of herself. And that image on the easel is the painting that the spectator's looking at. So it's a doubling. The reason why the painting behind the figure is a paint by number painting is because paint by number paintings are a system. It's a system that allows anybody who wants to try to make a painting to be able to make a painting that's like one that they already appreciate. But you can see there's a kind of arbitrariness to the way the paint is being applied to the paint by number painting, which means that the subject in the picture is taking liberties with the way in which the system determines the way you represent this already outlined and defined image, even of oneself.
And so I want to really challenge us to get into our visual analysis mind and our theoretical mind, which we stretch a lot in the practice of art history. But a lot of the work in art history is rooted in visual analysis and speaking to what we see and how that informs how we interpret what we see. And so again, I want to ground this Black woman figure and affirm that we too, just like her are Black users who are stepping into these systems, right? The system that she is working with in this image is a paint by number. This is a system that's given to her, and she herself is taking agency in reimagining on her palette approaching that system that is instructed for her to follow and how she chooses to reclaim how she shows up. Now, if we look at her in her fullness and how she's portraying herself in this portrait, there is a difference. There's a difference to the level of technique and application and even the color palette of what she's wearing. I'm using this as a grounding image to affirm that we too are taking technologies, they're just digital technologies. We're approaching these systems on the web, right? Social media platforms. We're aware that we are doubling and reflecting our imagery online. And again, we really want to root you in being critical thinkers about how we show up in these spaces. And we want to affirm that in 2026, we are not doing things by accident on the web or happenstance, right? There is a level of authenticity, agency, and intentionality that Black folks approach technology with, and how we share humor, joy, sadness, changes, and identity formation practices in visual culture. We're about to get into the web, but I just want to affirm that art imitates life and life imitates art, right? And many of the images and media that we are seeing on the web are pulled from primary sources like paintings, film, television, etc. So again, this is one of my favorites. I hope it becomes one of yours. And just again, want to center us in thinking about we are active agents and how we are showing up and contributing to the web.
And also wanting to double down and reaffirm Camille and saying, understanding how the technique and application comes into the digital space for Black folks. We want to kind of move into the conversation of Black communities online and how Black communities are able to navigate resistance, but also simply understanding that these spaces, as Camille stated, were not created out of reaction, right? They were created out of need. And a lot of times these needs are pure joy, right? And so understanding that variety of the kind of curation of the visual communities that we see online is due to the fact that Black folks have been doing this. We are now just showing up in these digital spaces. And so we welcome you and want you to maybe put in the chat some Black communities of hashtags that you all are a part of online. Some of the ones that we wanted to lift up: Black Book Top, Growing Up Black, Black Girl Makeup, Alt Black, and Black Academics.
Yes, RIP Black Tumblr. That was a very magical, powerful space. Please feel free to drop some hashtags in Black communities that you're active in, contribute to, or just admire on the web. Yes, Talani, Black Tumblr. There are a lot of sunset spaces where we had a large presence, where we've chosen to migrate to other spaces. But yes, also Black Navy on Twitter. If you were there, you know. If you know, you know. And so now we're going to transition and really get into what these communities are like on the web. So we also understand that in navigating the web, there's a level of agency and access, right? As people who can contribute to the web, the modern web 2.0, not the static web in the early 2000s, where we can actively contribute. And so we definitely wanted to lift up Black visual identities on the web that have been historically hidden or marginalized, that are now at the forefront taking up space as advocates. And so we have people like Imani, Crutches and Spice. We have people like Ariana Rose Phillip, first Black transgender physically disabled model to ever be represented by a major modeling agency, and Valissa Thompson, CEO of Ramp Your Voice, who really created the hashtag that went viral, Disability So White, to really raise awareness about Black disability and those identities in different spaces.
We also want to lift up Black artists as well, as a variety of Black media makers. And I also just want to reaffirm as well, and kind of also circle back to the work of Moya Bailey and Misogynoir Transformed. And I just want to kind of uplift the idea that I do think that the work of Dr. Bailey is so special because she does focus on the ways in which you know, other kinds of intersections of identities come at play at a faster rate and are disproportionately more marginalized online. And so also just wanting to uplift that as well.
And then as we're thinking about Black identities and visual culture on the web, we now have way more visibility of the Black trans community. So we think about advocates and icons like T.S. Madison, folks like Dominique Morgan, who are in dialogue with us every day. I wake up looking forward to what Dominique is going to say today. And Caden Coleman also as a trans man and bringing awareness to their birthing journey. And so it's important as Black people navigating the web, we are thinking about not only how we show up, yes, imagine, right? How we're showing up on the web and creating more visibility and collaboration and partnership to lift up all of the Black community. And at Archiving the Black Web and in me and Sakyra's work, when we're talking about the fullness of Blackness, we're talking about people able-bodied, disabled, trans, non-binary, educated, non-educated, PhD, unhoused, whatever it is, those identities matter to us and shape how we show up in the world. So now we're going to kind of popcorn back and forth. Now we can get into it, into the ways in which we're actively contributing through hashtags, memes, and viral moments. And so I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic to you, Sakyra, to share a bit more about hashtags.
Yes, absolutely. So we wanted to highlight kind of key components of very central digital spaces, if you will. So understanding that what a hashtag is, we do have the definition there. If you kind of want to look more into that, but also understanding the hashtag as a very key component to digital content online. And so we also understand we see hashtags like Black Lives Matter, Black Girl Magic, Say Her Name, Black Salon Problems, Disability Too White, and Growing Up Black. And we also see these, again, I want to reaffirm that we see these coming out of spaces of need, right? And not out of reaction. And I think that many times, especially when not we, but when folks outside of the community are studying, for example, hashtags online in reference to Black communities, a lot of the times there is this idea that these things were born out of reaction. And so also just want to kind of lift up this idea of how important this text is that ultimately becomes kind of a connection and network between related content, right? And so understanding how important this is as we are making our way through virality and memes online and seeing the power of the hashtag and its reoccurrence.
Absolutely. And even the power of literally the hash creates almost like a light level relational database where we can go down a rabbit hole, right? And see folks in conversation. The powerful thing about hashtags too is that they are transitioning across different platforms that we're contributing to. And it's interesting to think about the ways in which the hashtag may show up on Twitter opposed to the way it shows up on Instagram. And that also has a lot to do with how the software evolved and how we contributed to shaping those spaces. Next up, we have the meme. God bless our girl Wendy, wherever she is in the world right now. How you doing? Memes really have been such a central part of digital culture, and also not only Black folks, but the rest of the world getting a deeper glimpse into how we express ourselves. And so traditionally, the meme is defined as an amusing or interesting genre of items that spread widely online through social media. Many of them just so happen to be spreading from person to person within a culture based on an idea, behavior, or style, but many of them have evolved into reactions or pivotal moments. And so we just wanted to lift up some memes here that are really central to pop culture. And it's important for us to study pop culture and visual culture because it informs how we also shape and see our identities, not only from TV media and streaming services, but also on the web. So shout out to Insecure, the greatest Lanithia leaks of the Real Housewives franchise. And just passing the mic to you, Sakar, if you want to share more about some of your favorite memes.
Yeah, absolutely. I also just wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of the meme showing up in popular culture, and just wanting to point out the idea that, so much of the humor and satire and sass and clapback that we see online comes from Black media. And so I think it's important to not only understand, how the meme situates itself in the present timeline, but also understanding, kind of looking at my own work, and what I've been thinking about recently is how humor functions as a form of memory work. And so we understand this visual that ultimately has captured a moment in time from the past and is now being used in the present, to kind of form this relatability, but also questioning what happens when these things are not used by certain folks, in the right ways, and harmful ways, right? And so I think it is important to, ask those questions also when we look at memes and really any component of visual culture that we see online, because so much of it has been taken from Blackness.
Thank you for saying that, Sakyra, and really affirming that a lot of the memes that everyday people are using who are also non-Black are coming directly from Black culture. So may times be using them out of context. But I wanted to lift up a comment in the chat. AMJ is asking, "Where's the bro with the question marks?" And oh boy, at the function, pursing his lips while he walks away. Thank you, Danny, for putting it in the chat. But also, I wanted to lift up the other side of, right, thinking about who is flooding Giphy and creating gifs about us. And I'll be very clear. Sakyra and I both having backgrounds in research and metadata practices, there is something to be said about how we engage with Giphy. The keywords that we as Black people, creators of the culture, would identify something, opposed to whomever uploaded that clip is totally disconnected. So for example, old boy at the function who's pursing his lips, on certain platforms on my mobile device, I can find him by typing in red cup. I can't find him by side eye, pursed lips, right? So there's also something to be said about the ways in which that Blackness is commodified and how people are putting it into the digital sphere and tagging it with metadata and naming strategies that we do not use in our culture, right? And so, yes, there is a deeper question to explore. Where is the bro with the question marks, old boy at the function, but also who is uploading this media and what tags are they associating with it if they're not naming these Black influencers who go viral online? So that is something that we should also just want to encourage everyone to think about. Now, when we're thinking about gifs and memes, a lot of them are coming from pop culture, media, television shows, music videos. A lot of the digitized media that's been digitally accessible from the 90s and the 2000s begin to flood, right? The spaces of Giphy and memes online. And so we have Gabrielle Union flicking her ponytail, Nene very unbothered. um, Tiffany Pollard, like frustrating her head, Viola Davis. We have so many, but it's important to think about the ways in which when it enters the digital space, it does not always stay in its original context. And I think that's important to think about with the reclamation, right? Some of us are on Slack channels at work responding with gifts about certain situations, while other people who may be non-Black may be taking the most dramatized stereotypes of ourselves, right? We see Halle Berry and Baps doing this over sensationalized caricature of Blackness, also giving a nod to Blaxploitation films. But it is important to think about the ways in which the Black face, the Black image and body are represented or misrepresented online. We're going to take a little journey through the web and talk about some record-breaking moments. I just wanted to pause for a moment. Sakyra, if you wanted to share more about this side.
Yes, thank you. If I could jump in, I just wanted to also kind of uplift again this idea, of just being, in these spaces, but also, being Black and researching these spaces. I think how interesting the way that Blackness can be commodified, when we are simply just being. And so I just wanted to also like reaffirm this idea that, um, you know, I think it's very important to understand who is creating, and why, because I think that this also goes into Black expressionism as well. And so we have kind of come together and have this form of communal knowledge as shared expressions within our communities. And then we do have folks, as Camille was stating, using them in the wrong context, who is uploading them, who is creating them. And so I did just want to jump in there and uplift what you were saying as well, Camille.
Thank you. So we're gonna go on a little fast track time travel through the web. If you were there, you were there. If not, we're glad to remind you of what happened. And so, wanted to lift up some record-breaking moments on the web. In 2011, Beyonce announces her pregnancy, and it sets a new Twitter record, over 8,868 tweets per second. That, to date, from my understanding, is the most tweets per second ever recorded for a single event. Shout out to Blue, our niece. In 2012, we have GIFs and memes that are now born, right? The technologies are allowing us to cut, edit, and put together static images or references from digital media and import them as GIFs and memes as responses and reactions to digital culture online. And in 2013, Black Girl Magic hashtag goes viral on Twitter, but then goes ahead and spreads across a myriad of different social media platforms. And Black Girl Magic is still a hashtag that has over 35 million hits to this day in 2026. And then in the 2014s, we start to see a rise of a global influencer, right? We're aware that people were uploading and creating content on YouTube for a very long time. But when YouTube was first accessible, most people were accessing YouTube in their homes, on their desktops in their homes. And now that we're also seeing a rise of mobile device usage and accessibility, in 2014 to 2016, we see a boom of global influencers bringing forward satire, new colloquial euphemisms, and ways of caricatures that we maybe have not seen before. So Peaches Monroe is the creator of Eyebrows on Fleek. We also have Why You Lying by Nick Frazier, his parody and remix of an original song. And again, if you're not non-black, if you are not black, you may not know the original song that he's creating a remix to. And Joanne the Scammer, really cosplaying whiteness in a black body and mirroring some of the things that we think but are unspoken. And so we see this rise of a global influencer between 2014 and 2016. Between 2016 and 2020, social media platforms continue to grow, and we all lived through it, the pandemic. This global shutdown caused lockdowns across the globe, and our social media engagement rapidly increased with a global user base exceeding 4.10 billion, numbers that the web has never reached before. So I think it's important for us to just think about this for a second, right? The amount of access, data, comments, gifts, images of ourselves, videos that we start to now contribute to the web. The web starts to become a larger communal space flooded with even more Black thoughts, media, and expressions than before. At the same time, we're also experiencing different protests for advocacy for social justice, Black Lives Matter, Breonna Taylor, Say Her Name movements. And also we have content creators on the bottom left who claim to be delivered, but also encouraging us to wear our mask when we're out. So I think it's really important to think about other things that were born during that time. We have verses, we have a boom of podcasts. So thoughts, opinions, interpretations, different ways of thinking are now entering a digital space, and TikTok and Snapchat that we've never engaged with before. Now, I think this is important for us to think about as well. We, as African diasporic people, we have migrations that go through many generations, forced, unforced, right? But we also have these migrations across the web. We come to digital spaces, we come to media, we make it hot. We are the ones who decide if the culture is relevant or not. And so when we're thinking about mapping virality, about movement and engagement across, right, bringing these media gifts, visuals, our thoughts across these different social media platforms, we're seeing a huge boost in mobile device sales, right? So that means mobile devices are more readily available to people across the globe. And Twitter has 192 million daily users in 2020. Facebook in 2016 is one of the top mobile apps in the US. Snapchat has over 238 million daily active users. Instagram introduces stories in competition of a similar video format like Snapchat, right? And so these software companies are seeing the value of Black presence online, Black voice, Black visibility, commodifying Blackness. And so our use of these tools is also shaping the ways in which that they're developing them. So for example, YouTube introduces YouTube Shorts, right? Creating content in a verbal, in a vertical orientation, where people can contribute and consume on their tablets and mobile devices. And so, really, just want us to think about our global power, our global impact, and how we're contributing to these different platforms. I'm going to pass this visual analysis to our girl, Sakyra.
Yes. Funny story and a very short story for you all that I found quite funny is that Camille and I were just chatting and I was mentioning to her that I was just watching the documentary on Hulu about Black Twitter, and she's actually there and she goes into this kind of backstory about, this idea that this picture was taken of her at a not great time and she was physically in pain. And now this has now been remixed, if you will, and reimagined across the web in various ways. And so, kind of a funny incident, but also wanting to talk on a more serious point that we do see this rise in content being produced as we move along and engage throughout time on the web. And so understanding that many images that we see, especially surrounding Blackness, oftentimes who are not Black authored, we must investigate the context, the history, and all of the things of kind of metadata, if you will, that we must engage with in order to understand how these things are being used and why. And I think it's especially important as we get into the conversation of remixing as reclamation. In this instance, we do see it as a form of humor, right? And of course, we do see that kind of as we get into the GIFs and memes, but we also can understand the dangers of this and how we are being surveilled online. And perhaps if this wasn't, a funny story, it could have ended very differently. If this could have been recirculated, especially when we're talking about Black folks' pain, Black folks' trauma, and the way that it is engaged and spread through in various ways without, the original creator or identifier in the room, if you will. And so just wanted to uplift that there with kind of the origin story of this, but ultimately the importance of why we must understand the way in which digital literacy can help us navigate and the way that we see reproduction of Blackness on the internet. And pairing with this and kind of getting into my own work, when I was doing my MA program at the University of Virginia, one of the things that I investigated was Black women's social positioning and their representations on Black reality television specifically. And one of the great scholars that I appreciate so dearly is Raquel Gates, because I think that her work was kind of transformative for me, but also transformative in the way that I see Blackness showing up online. And so in this case, she is talking about Black reality television and understanding the ways in which particular imagery of Blackness in those spaces can be rather harmful, but understanding that oftentimes we are not afforded the opportunity to just stop at being okay with the harm. We actually have to take a step forward in advance and understand the reasoning behind this harm and have those conversations. And so, in the case of Black reality television, she states, instead of assuming excuse me, instead of assuming that viewers of Black reality television are only tuning in because of the drama and derogatory theatrics, these negative images should be seen as a way for viewers to look towards the show to become a repository of identities and experiences that have been discarded by the respectable media. And so, understanding that when we are looking and kind of connecting with Black media as well, understanding the way that we do want to reaffirm and uplift that Blackness is not a monolith. And so we do understand that there are various aspects of Black media that often might become repositories of identities for others across the diaspora, right? But we also have to understand in the way in which these particular images, some of them, if you will, the way that they have been disregarded by respectable media for not living up to respectability politics, if you will. And so I think that Raquel Gates does a great job at interpreting this through Black reality television, but I also think we can address this in the larger conversation and the way in which we are interacting with content online that is made about us and quote unquote for us, if you will. And we also kind of piggybacking off of that, want to jump into kind of the conversation of the reinforcement of negative stereotypes. And I've kind of talked a bit about them. And so, Camille, I'll turn it over to you if you have anything else to add, but also wanting to kind of show how that is portrayed even outside of the web, because so much of the content that is reproduced by Blackness is, as we've talked about, from other Black media components. We see this showing up in a way that is stereotypical on the web.
Absolutely. Thinking when we think about identity formation and fashioning oneself and how we are perceived, as we stated before, Black people in 2026 and have been for a long time active participants and agents on the web. And so it is unfortunate that we do have stereotypes that still rise to the top that are deemed important. And so, unfortunately, we do see a lot of minstrelsy, right? Minstrelsy in the sense of that performativity that we've seen historically from Jim Crow, from colonization, of what is a caricature of a certain type of Black identity that itself is not a reality. And we see a lot of this, unfortunately. I'm not going to show visuals, but there are food influencers who have this performativity that is mirrors minstrelsy, right? And then we also come up against digital blackface, non-Black individuals on the web using our faces, gifs, reactions in the most extreme ways, and especially out of context. So when we think about ain't nobody got time for that, or hide your wife, hide your kids, or those type of crisis situations where we are literally just expressing how we made it out or how we got over, become viral memes that everyone in the world begins to use for themselves. And then unfortunately, reality TV in the beginnings, when we think about what that looks like, and now the rise of the violence in reality TV, or these hyper extreme negative stereotypes that the people themselves are aware that they're playing caricatures, but then it is also influencing and raising different cultures who've never engaged with Black people before, or young Black folks, that this is normal, right? And that they see social media as a means of viability, because it is important for us to think about visual culture in 2026 does equate also to social currency. We see lives transformed on the web by their presence, by the amount of hits and views. And so sometimes the views and hits are not always influenced by what is the most authentic representation of Blackness. But again, Blackness is a monolith. We have all different types of folks in our cultures and communities who are reflecting the good, bad, and ugly of our culture. Now we can talk about reclamation, all the good things. We love to talk about the ways in which we're showing up online. And so Sakyra and I will really kind of be in conversation, and everyone else in the chat, feel free to lift up different forms of reclamation that you're seeing online that inspire you, or movements that you contribute to yourself.
And also, we wanted to also point out the just how much creativity is born out of reclamation. for Black folks as well. And when we get into the different forms of reclamation that there are, even as just someone who I would consider, not even that far as kind of to the furthest extent of my research, but seeing the different ways and forms that even my own intersections of identity show up in forms of reclamation online has been really, really fascinating. And so excited to share more about those specifically. Maybe arguably my favorite one.
And before we transition into that, I just wanted to lift up a comment um, in the chat about different types of accounts pretending to be Black folks. Just want to be aware that yes, we are seeing AI present in different spaces, and there are Black people who do utilize AI tools as a form of reclamation to reimagine. I say to Black folks who want to run to AI to reimagine to instead turn away and run to the archive. What you're looking for exists, you just haven't been in the archive yet. And also us being mindful that as we utilize more AI tools or different technological tools, right, we are active agents. We have agency. We also should have literacy and critical thinking skills of how we're approaching a tool, why we're using it, what happens to our image and likeness if we are choosing to put our faces on these platforms. It is important for us to think about terms and conditions on different social media platforms where we are just giving away the license to our likeness in perpetuity. And again, encouraging you all to be critical agents of your image and likeness. As I said, visual culture does lead to social currency. And so we want to encourage you to be the stewards of your own Black joy, Black influence, Black humor, Black beauty, Black innovation, and to also protect your IP of all the unique things that you create. And so I'm going to kick the mic back to Sakyra talking about what influences her work through Black Book Talk.
Yes, and I will keep it brief here because I can get really excited. Talking about Black Book Talk is one of my favorite forms of reclamation in the space. I started and kind of want to preface by saying that I think it's important to understand that also the ways in which we see ourselves in communities online. And that was really big for me because I think that the way that I came to this work as a researcher, I was very ingrained in the community before then, before I'd even thought about actually engaging in this work in a more critical lens, if you will. And so, one of the ways in which I have seen a transformative action of Black folks and their practices of reclamation online has been through Black Book Talk. If you are on TikTok or if you're not, you may have seen in many physical bookstore spaces, if you will. There might be a book talk sign or book talk, popular books on book talk here, book talk that. However, if you quickly even do a little skim, you'll notice that there probably aren't any Black folks writing those books. There are probably not even any Black folks looking at the stand. So it was very disheartening going into the physical space and seeing this impact of how communities online can have a very real impact in the physical. And so, one of the ways that Black folks have done this is through this space in which we are taking transformative ways in the way in which we approach speaking about Black literature, but also non-Black literature as well, which I found very interesting as kind of a tidbit that I was getting as I was interviewing folks. And so I thought it was really interesting to see, like, as on this slide, we have 1,000 Black girl books, and that was actually one of the very first archival movements, if you will, that kind of held a space for Black girls who wanted to read. And so seeing the way in which Black folks have moved in contemporary spaces and have brought upon this very engaged group of Black folks who are willing to have discourse and be in community across literature has been very fascinating for me and has really kind of toned in the fact of the importance of communal knowledge. And so really wanted to uplift the space as well.
Thank you, Sakyra. I really appreciate you bringing that term into the conversation, communal knowledge. This is something that we all collectively have and we're aware that we have. For example, growing up Black, somehow everyone ends up uploading the same bed sheets and uh, like parodies of you being frustrated that you didn't take the meat out the freezer and your mom is on her way home from work. Like it's funny when we think about this communal collective knowledge. Like, were we all raised by the same person? And so, thinking about communal knowledge and communal memory, I very much so wanted to lift up one of my favorite moments on the web that I will continue to come back to always and forever. In 2017, we had a breakthrough moment where Gucci sends down a knockoff of Dapper Dan's original design from the 80s down their runway. Now, if you all are familiar with the history of Dapper Dan, I encourage you to look deeper into it. He really is the godfather of tailoring and also our understanding and relationship with logos and really exaggerated silhouettes, but very fine and tailored intentional silhouettes. This is even more powerful because the original image that becomes circulatory on the web was not a digital born image, right? These are physical born images that people brought into the web and it was shared here and there through Tumblr, through Twitter. So the Black online community started to have a deeper understanding of what these visuals were and meant. And so that's why we were easily able to identify absolutely not. This is Dapper Dan, and you all need to be aware of who he is. As I mentioned before, our social currency means a lot. And so, because of all of these voices on Black platforms and different social media spaces, Gucci then acknowledged Dapper Dan, brought him into a global partnership, and allowed him to come out of hiding. And so, I think it's important for us to acknowledge that our voice also shifts and shapes culture online and can transform the quality of life or opportunities for creatives who have only contributed amazing imagery and visual identities to Black culture. So just wanted to lift this up as well. And also wanted to lift up how powerful the web is also for Black beauty across generations. We're not only seeing a range of Black identities and Black skin tones, we're also seeing a range of Black folks in age, identity, expressions show up and share their beautification and identity formation practices on the web. And so brands and spaces that did not think that we were deemed valuable are now running in droves to us because they understand our buying power, our social media power, and also our social currency power. I know we're coming up close to time, so we want to lift up this quote by Tonya Sutherland, who is an amazing scholar and contributes a lot to literary conversations and digital conversations that help frame myself and Sakyra's work and other memory workers in being intentional and understanding race and the digital afterlife online. And so in this quote from the text, Resurrecting the Black Body, understanding that we are not going to be able to keep up with the pace that technology is developing. And it's not being legislated rapidly enough in a way that's going to protect us. So, what steps can we take to understand how technology works? Who owns the technology, and understand the value that we have and what they're gaining by giving something that looks free. You are the product. And so, Sakyra, if you want to just unmute at this point, we can just be in dialogue. And other people, we really want you to meditate on this quote to understand that you are the product, you have social currency, and your image and likeness is going much further online than you may have initially been aware of. People can also at this point add any questions to the chat.
Um, I wanted to jump in and kind of give my take on the question that was asked, which was, do you see a connection between hashtags such as coquette and the rise of conservative and racial and gender ideologies? And I think that there is definitely a connection there because I think that also kind of the well, not really the original form of the hashtag was created, but the way in which we see Black folks and other marginalized communities using the hashtag was through that narrative, right? And so I think that we see kind of on the other side of that as well an influx of if you will, right wing and conservative ideologies that are also seeping through as well. And we also see this happening, which is why I recommend so much algorithms of oppression, because we see the way in which we can get into these echo chambers and unwantingly viewing content that is harmful to us, such as some of this um, far right wing ideology, if you will. And so I do think that there is a connection between those. Oh, and also just wanted to thank you, Camille, for going here. Also just wanted to uplift kind of this idea of understanding the kind of multiplicity of Blackness online, but also the ways in which it shows up. When Camille and I were making this, I was kind of looking at digital afterlife and also was kind of seeing connections between the podcast and also things that are written in the literature. And so one of the things that we wanted to call out was kind of the way in which we see digital afterlife showing up. And so we see Black memory workers as keepers of digital afterlives of Black folks, but we also see this kind of as a contrast to the lens of Western archives. And I think that's something that Camille and I were getting at through this webinar is this idea of communal knowledge and keeping that the Black community has done and continues to do in digital afterlife as far as Black memory workers. And so I do want to uplift that as well.
Absolutely. At this time, just wanted to stop screen sharing to just answer some questions in the chat and hold space if anyone had any other thoughts or comments. I know we're at 3:06. I wanted to address Lindsay's question around, have you either considered the use of sound for trends as they have been separated from their original source? So meaning making might change for people viewing videos. 1,000% yes, Lindsay. We didn't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole of reclamation and remixing, but it was definitely something that we started talking about. Even for me, recently finding out the sound that goes, Black people. I had no idea that that person wasn't Black who made that sound and comment, right? And how we're then taking that sound to put over images and videos of us in places of laughter or humor or child, why are we doing this? Or things like that. And so there is a lot of power to the voice of our movements, but it is very interesting to think again, thinking about Black people as it's coming from a place of agency, approaching these digital tools, remixing, unpacking, rebuilding, and putting back online. Even Mark Keys, the remix god, who takes all these different viral clips and takes a viral sound and then adds a rhythm or a different track to it. Like the ways in which we are reshaping and how we're engaging with the web is ever evolving. And I'm sure that there's plenty of researchers, Sakyra, that are studying that work intentionally.
Absolutely. And I also kind of thinking directly at my more recent work of thinking about, as Camille stated, how humor comes into play with the remixing of sounds. I think that that is a very important component in the way in which Black folks are taking nods at certain aspects of popular culture, if you will, through the remixing of sounds or even there are certain times I'm thinking of like on TikTok where there are certain things that certain creators do that when you see a Black creator remixing and reimagining and taking a nod at commentary on such, you see the way in which like there is such a fascination with the way sounds and trends can be remade and shaped into a form of commentary.
Does anyone have any additional thoughts or questions or comments? We really, again, wanted to open up the series this year, grounding us in the understanding of who we are. We are active agents online. So as we go through the different sessions and talk more about literacy, digital literacy, technologies that we're contributing to, web archiving practices, archiving in practice, ethical practices on the web, we thought it was really important to just ground us in understanding that we are actively taking up space. We are changing and shifting cultural narratives online, and just want to empower everyone to be very intentional about the platforms you join, literacy, reading the text. If you don't understand the terms and conditions, I guarantee you there is an influencer or a legal advisor who is an influencer who's breaking down the terms and conditions. Because ownership of media has changed, speaking to Marshana's question about policing of language related to DEI, et cetera. Now that a lot of these platforms that maybe started as joy have now become privatized, tools for hyper surveillance, right? Data harvesting, et cetera. Face recognition, right? Building those type of databases for surveillance systems and those types of states. It's important that we think about how we are engaging and if we're choosing to engage in safer spaces. Also want to lift up again the value of your intellectual property. We've seen people like the young woman eyebrows on fleek. She was just expressing herself. Other people ran and did the trademark. We think about tendonism. Unca's finally free, right? We have a history online of being radical agents of change to also ensure that what is ours we gain. And so I'm glad Unc now owns tenderism, but there will be another colloquial euphemism that goes viral. There will be another moment that changes someone's lives. It's just thinking about how we continue to show up with communal memory to lift up Black folks contributing on the web, and also too, where you are choosing to publish your intellectual property, and encourage you that you retain ownership of it and that you are the steward of your history or your stories or whichever you share. There's something called a Creative Commons license that is free that people can access online if they are publishing digital media. You yourself can also add copyrights to your work. You can trademark the name, your name, or the names of the works that you're publishing. But yeah, we just want to encourage you to know that you are. Thank you, Danette. Please share the Creative Commons link, even your pitch decks for different things that you're creating. But we just want to thank all of you for joining us. We really appreciate you being in community with us at Archiving the Black Web. Please continue to stay connected to Sakyra to follow her work. Sakyra, where can people reach you or connect with
Um,
you online?
you can find me on LinkedIn. It's literally Sakyra Abbott, or my email, which is sakyra.abbott6@gmail.
Awesome. Again, everyone, please join us for our upcoming spring sessions. You can find all of the events at archivingtheblackweb.org. And as y'all know over here, we keep it very black. Please be safe, stay hydrated, keep them edges on fleek. And we look forward to seeing y'all at our next webinar about Black culture on the web. Thank you so much, everyone. Be
Thank
safe.
you, everyone.